Hi Scrappy friends, welcome back. In today's video, we are going to circle back to our go-to design series. Earlier this year, I posted a video about my 5 favorite go-to designs. Are there more? Sure there are, but those are my top favorite ones. And that video I had as a 2-part series for beginning scrapbookers. And the idea was that a beginning scrapbooker could watch the video and find some simple ways to get inspired and spark their creativity and get going with their scrapbooks. But for those of us that have been scrapping for a long time, it's a great reference and a great tool to kind of remind us of the basics. So during that video, I asked, should we do an intermediate level go-to design? And the response, I have to say, it was overwhelming, and it was definitely a yes. So that's what we're here to do today. We are going to move forward in our go-to design, take it from our beginning scrapbook into an intermediate level. So what I had to do was decide, how am I going to present this video? I could do either just one long video like we did before, or break it up into smaller pieces. This one's going to be a little more detailed, so I decided it's probably best to break them up into smaller, more manageable videos. So I'm going to be doing 5 videos, one for each of the go-to designs I presented in the first video. And in fact, that first video, I'm going to link it at the end of this one, just in case you missed it. So I thought it would be easier to have the little videos so that you can go back and use them as a reference. I'm going to house these in the basics playlist I here on my channel, so you can easily access them and go back to them as a reference if you need to. I thought that that would be better than having one long video that we now have to scroll through each time, like, what was that half and half design? And you're looking through the whole long video to find the inspiration. So now you can just go to the video that you want to. So we are going to start today with the block design. I feel like that's the most common one that you are going to see when you're looking at sketches and other inspiration. A lot of people use the block design. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and get scrapping. So I have my block design all set up and ready to go. So remember, a block design is a big square area that we can now use to house all of our photos, our journaling box, our title, and our embellishments. So we want everything to fit in here. We can make different sizes of this block. In the previous video, we did one that went way out to the edge of our paper and only showed about 1/4 of an inch all the way around. So that would be an 11.5 inch block. And then this is a 10.5 inch block, and we even went down to a 9-inch block. So depending on how many photos you want to get in your block, how much pattern paper you want exposed around the edge, both those things will help you decide what size block to make. But for this example, we're going to use a 10.5 inch block. And for this example, I'm going to call it drop the block. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the block and I'm going to drop it right here down into the right-hand corner. Now you'll see I exposed a lot more of the pretty pattern paper behind there. A couple questions. Yes, you can drop it to either side. And if I was making a double page spread, I would probably on the other side drop it to the left-hand side so that it would match up with this one and sit side by side. You could also raise the block and move it up to the corner, and that would help change your look of your album very easily and simply. Okay, but for today, we're going to drop the block down into that right-hand corner, and it's going to sit right there. Now this 10.5 inch block houses 3 full-size photos without any cropping down or cutting them down, and we can arrange them lots of different ways. We can do 2 horizontal, 1 vertical. We have room to move them around. We have room to decorate, add a journaling area. We can even do 2 verticals and 1 horizontal. So it's very flexible depending on the orientation of your photos. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to put my 2 like this, 2 horizontal and 1 vertical. And down here, I'm going to bring in my journaling box. So you see, there's lots of room in a 10.5 inch block. Your photos are just going, a large photo just might be tighter together. So what are a couple ways I would level this up to a more intermediate style layout? The first thing I would do is maybe bring in another block. And this one is a 10 by 3/4 block, so slightly bigger than the white one. And I would just put it right behind there and still drop everything down into that corner. And this just gives it a little frame and really helps to pop out and define where our block is. I would use coordinating cardstock for whatever is in my paper already. And of course, I'm going to be asked if I would gut this. I would probably gut that paper behind. I would just do a cut, like an L cut, instead of a square like we normally do. But yes, I would gut. It really would depend on the layout I'm doing, how fast I want to get done. And so it really would be a personal choice for you. Okay, so the first thing is I would look for the layers, adding layers behind and maybe even bringing in some photo mats. So this is getting really tight with the photo. So the biggest photo mat I would want to bring in is probably another 6x4. And I'll put that right there. We can even turn this one this direction, again, depending on the photos that we have. So these are 6x4 photo mats. So I need to reduce my photo just a little bit. So in that case, I'll bring in a little bit smaller photos and shrink them down to a 3.5x5 inch. Then I kind of want to see where I could put my title. I could always bring in a little title here, slide my journaling box down just a little bit and add it right there. Another place I could bring in my title would be up here. I could take out this big photo and bring in a mat card. I love to sneak in those mat cards, especially the bigger ones. So this would be replacing a photo, or maybe if you had a lot of photos, you would want to consider putting a peekaboo pocket there. So as I'm doing this, I would just, again, bring in color cardstock and colors that match my paper behind. I do want to embellish this page a little bit. So for my demonstration purposes, I'm going to bring in some of these beautiful flower embellishments from the Floral Essential Packs. These are so gorgeous and I just love playing with them. They're so big and bold, they're just gorgeous. I would just bring in some flowers and to kind of mimic my background piece there, and maybe just use this area for embellishing and just keep layering them up, and then maybe bring in a leaf right here, something like that, bringing in the same colors from my layout. And then another area I would embellish is over here next to my journaling card. So I'm going to push up my title a little and my card and then bring in some of these. Again, I'm just bringing in the orange to match. Just keep embellishing like normal. Here I'd maybe bring in another leaf. Let's see, kind of go like this, kind of take up the area down here, but leaving the journal box opening, and then something like this over here. Put 2 leaves maybe. Okay, so not that the embellishing is important because this is just a sample. Another area that I might consider putting in a layer is to replace the white. And this is a real big personal choice. And I just happen to have this one in my stash. So I thought, well, it really shows the how different it would make the layout look. Changed out the white, but this would definitely level it up to an intermediate level by adding in that, going bold and adding in a pattern piece right here. It doesn't have to be as bold as this polka dot, but I think you'll see here, it does look pretty once it's finished. Super gorgeous. Just changing that up really helps to kick that layout up a notch. So I go through a kind of a checklist in my mind. I do the layering, which would be the black and the polka dot. And when I think about layering, I also think, where do I want to bring in some mats? And so I brought in some photo mats. And of course, the mat card really helps to bring in some color as well. And then my embellishings. But another area I would look at before I go on to my second page is I would look at my tools. Are there any tools that I would want to bring in? And I'm not going to punch out all of my tools today. I'm just going to tell you what I decided on. So of course I went right for my embossed flower. It goes with my overall theme, and I picked colors that also were in my pattern paper. So I'm looking for my tools that go with my theme and that colors that would enhance my layout. And I would just add maybe one more of these to each area. That way I love playing with my tools and I get to use them and I get to add a little touch of my own personality. Another tool that I would bring in is I went through my border making cartridges and I punched out a little bit of wispy chain, and I just thought this would look so cute right under here. We don't always have to use our border makers in the full strip. Here's just a little bit, but it kind of trails down that embellishment cluster. And there we go. That leveled up that block layout. Now, for the double page, the easiest and simple way is to just make a complete mirror image. And for that, I would probably bring in another piece of this paper here and drop my block down to the left-hand area. So everything would align up like this across the page. But I do want to give you an example that we could probably use with the other layouts we're going to do today as well. And it doesn't always have to be a block on this side. So let's start with a piece of plain bright white cardstock. My main goal with this is to bring in elements from this page over here so it doesn't look exactly the same, but you can tell that they're related. So it's easiest to start with that bold pattern we have on the outside, but now I'm just going to put one little strip down here at the bottom. Next thing I would do is to bring in maybe some of that green. I like the deep darkness of that black, so I thought, well, I would bring in that black too. This black strip would be where I could house some photos. So I could bring in 2 6x4 photos right down here. But if you had even more photos that you wanted to bring in, you sure do have room up here. And I'm going to bring in some more of that beautiful green. And these are 4x4 squares, so I'm going to tilt them a little bit because if I put them straight across, then it's not going to fit that well. So I would do maybe something like this, kind of stagger them so it looks pretty. And then one last little layering thing I would do is bring in maybe a scrap of this polka dot. We had to trim it down, so I had a scrap left, and maybe just tuck a tiny piece in there. We don't want it to overwhelm our page by being too much polka dot. I don't even think that this necessarily needs any more embellishment clusters, but if you wanted to, maybe you would want to do something right up here, but something pretty minimal. That way you still have your 3. This is a good alternative to any time that you do a block and you don't want to do necessarily the same thing over here. Okay, so let me clean this up and show you another design idea that we can do with the block. Hold on. Okay, let's begin variation number 2. The nickname I came up with this one is called Shorten the Block, because on the previous ones we did a frame style foundation with a block that went all the way down here to the bottom. And this time I shortened it up. I went 11.5 inches wide by 9.5 inches tall, and it leaves us all this beautiful room down here so that we can do some embellishing or maybe make a border. We like to make those pre-made borders and then we're not sure how to use them. This is a perfect layout to use a pre-made border, or just to build a border up onto this page, and then to keep all of your photos right here in the center. So let me bring in some photo mats and show you how I would put photos on here. Now, a block is really good for like grid style photo placement. This layout gives you 4 photos, 2 that you're keeping whole at 6x4, and then 2 that you can cut down to just a 4x4. So let me bring in some props. I have this beautiful border that I punched out with the floral ribbon. Again, I'm just looking at the colors in my pattern paper, and it might be hard to see, but there is some baby blue in here, and also the theme of my layout. This punch has a beautiful place for a little decorative strip, so I would definitely do that just to bring in another pop of color that matches my pattern paper here. And then maybe for some texture, I would bring in something like this. This is Rustic Fence right at the bottom, and then place my border up on top. Something like that, just to kind of build, just to demonstrate how you can build up your border down here. And then whenever I make a border, I like to think this is my primary decoration on the page. So I would be okay if I didn't have any up here, but I think we could also squeeze in some up here if we wanted to. Just to keep with my theme, I'll bring in these little embossed flowers from the first page we did and maybe do something like that. So of course you can keep adding to it, and that helps to level up your page as well. But I would still feel like I have to get some journaling and possibly a title on this page. I would either do a 4x4 peekaboo pocket or remove one photo altogether. So in that case, I would bring in my journaling card. Again, I like to use this size. It's a 3x4. And then maybe a title, something like this. So we're going to go through our steps of how we're going to level this up. So the first thing we would look at is layering and where we could add bring in some possible layers. Just like I did on the first one, I'm going to bring in a second block. So bringing in more pattern paper and then just creating more and more frames behind elevates the page right away. See, that just brings on a whole new look. I love that look. Then I would look at where I can maybe add some photo mats, and I think I could put some mats on those too. So I'll bring in some of the blue to match the bottom. And now I'm thinking about my tools. Now I did bring in 3 tools right down here, but maybe I want to bring some more up to here. Bring in a punch of some kind, and I liked this butterfly, so I maybe would do something like that right next to my title. And if you feel like you wanted to add a little more something to that to level up your embellishment cluster, I'd bring in a little bit of an embellishment base to kind of put underneath it like that. You see, this page doesn't need a lot of embellishments. It has a lot going on with our border down here at the bottom. So let's create a double page. So maybe we can just run this all the way across. I think sometimes that is overwhelming on a page. What I would rather do is maybe drop our shortened block down here to the bottom, and then I can build up a border here and build up my layout down here. So let's go ahead and replicate our border right up there. See, it looks beautiful. We have the same exact elements, but they're just on opposite sides of the page. So it kind of gives us that visual interest that we're looking for. Here, we want to kind of do the same thing we did over here, but somehow we want to make it different. So in this case, maybe I would swap out some of the colors. So I have pink as the background here and blue as the photo mats. So I would maybe bring in a blue pattern paper here and put it on top of my shortened block, and then maybe bring in some pink photo mats instead. Now that I have the second page going on, I feel like I can maybe spread some things out a little bit, and I would probably go back to having my 4-inch photo here, maybe move my journaling box over here. It really wouldn't matter. You have the same amount of photos in both places. I feel like I'm just spreading out some of the elements. And we still would want to bring in some kind of pink mat to kind of match over here. We can do the same thing we did on this side, just bring in some pink mats for those 2 photos. But something else I wanted to talk about is bringing in a photo strip, a longer strip of paper that we're going to use for a photo mat. So in this case, I might change some things around, move this over here, put my photo mat right here, and then we can add some photos down this way. This is a 4.5 by 10-inch photo mat, so it can hold a 4x6 very nicely, or you could even bring on a smaller photo at a 3x4. And then we have some room over here to do embellishing. And I'm actually going to move this back, I think, to the first page. I think I liked it better over there. It feels like this page now is getting pretty heavy. And I'd go to maybe 2 4x4 photos here. And I like to scoot my photos closer together, so I would kind of scoot that mat over, and then, like I said, I'd bring in an embellishment cluster. Okay, so these embellishments literally just came out of the little box I keep over here on my work cart, And so I'm just literally pulling things from there. So maybe I would do like a piece of leafy vine going up, just a partial piece, doesn't have to go all the way up, but just kind of to draw your eye up like that. Then I would maybe bring in some of these little slide reels. This is just some punch outs from the slide reel punch. I just made these into little mini embellishments. I really feel like they can go with any layout. I happen to have these little flowers in the tray as well. Again, that's the embossed flower. And then I would just kind of overlap it. And then to top it off, I have a butterfly here. So maybe I would bring a butterfly in over here. So we have this whole room to add even more tools and more embellishments made from art tools. Now over here, I did want to show one more thing. So let's me remove my flowers. We could maybe do a smaller embellishment off of this area. I had this little tag. I'll just tuck it in underneath that. I like this tag because it has that little arrow. Looks like it's almost pointing up to my journaling box there. Continue to embellish, bringing in colors. I had a pink one in there, so why not add it like that? And some more, a little embellishment with some words that say sparkle, shine, and shimmer. So just to show that we still have room to do some small embellishment clusters on this type of layout. So this would, again, is what I would call the shortened block. So let me clean all this up and I'm going to come right back and we're going to do the third and final variation in our intermediate go-to design looking at the block. And while I'm away cleaning this up and prepping for that third variation, I'd like to ask you to please go ahead and click that like button. If you're just loving these go-to designs, let me know by clicking the like button. I sure would appreciate it, and I do appreciate each and every time you do that. So thank you, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we just kind of saw a little sneak peek of this example on our previous shorten the block variations, but this one I called the block with the strip, because now we're going to focus on the actual strip that was running down. Like we used in the shortened block, we use a strip to kind of house our photos. And the block design looks really well with a strip coming down. It gives a lot of visual interest to your layout. But before I do that, let's go ahead and start with some layering concepts, because I've been doing this throughout the entire video. And I've been bringing in another layer on the block. I've been putting it on top of the big bold pattern, but this time I want to bring in behind so that we can see. So I started with my cardstock background and then an 11-inch square, and now I'm going to bring in just a slightly larger block. This time it's cardstock, and I did give it a cut with a fancy blade. This one I used the Deckel Blade, but really whichever blade, and again, whatever is going to help accent your theme. And it should really only be about an 11¼ inch block. And let's start with a 4-inch strip. It's very nice, doesn't take up much room. And again, it already just added. You can place it over here to the right, or you can place it to the left, however you would like. Let's start over here on the right. Is perfect for a 3.5 by 5.5 inch photo, maybe even 2 of those going vertically down the page. And it's also really good for 3.5 inch photos. And you can get 3 of those down the page. So if you happen to have the photos that you can crop down to a smaller size, the perfect idea for that. And then over here in our open area, we have room for a full-size 4x6 photo. And then here we can even run one of those vertically if we want, or we can also turn it on its side and do it that way instead. But again, I'm always looking for where am I going to put my title and my journaling. So for this, I probably would take this one away. Then I would bring in a journaling card and my title. So we've already have done our layering with this block back here. And so my next thing I would probably look at is, can I mat any photos? And again, just like we've been doing, I would probably take away my large photo, bring in a mat, crop my photo down just a little bit. And then over here, I would like to bring in another mat as well. But what I wouldn't come through and mat all of those. I still want to see my designer paper back here on the strip. So I probably would pick just one of these and maybe bring in a 1/4 inch mat for that, and it would still fit perfectly within our strip here. So some ideas there. For embellishing, I would do something like this. I have a little tag here punched out of the same color I used for that photo mat. That way I'm kind of bringing in that same color. It's just a small little short tag. I'd probably do it over here, bring that title down so I could read it, and bring in some more embellishments. I just love these flowers, so we'll bring that back in, maybe raise our tag a little bit, and then bring in some little green. So we have all this area here. Then I would kind of look at the strip and see how can I bring and level that up. And for that, I probably would bring in just a little piece of green. And this one I also trimmed with the Deckel Blade, just like I did here. And it's only about a 1/4 inch. And I'd probably either tuck it right under this strip. Let's scoot it all over so we have room here. And I'd bring in one for the other side. And that just kind of popped that strip out. And there we go. That is an elevated block with a strip. Now, we can still play with the strip because there's several different things that we can do with this strip. And maybe you can use one of these ideas for second page to the same layout. So let me go ahead and remove some of these for now. And I'm going to bring in another strip. This time I cut the strip to 6.5 inches. So a much wider strip than we had before. We're going to keep the same concepts, just changing out the strip. So let's bring back in our little accent pieces here. Well, we already have these laying here, so we would do something like this. We could maybe make sure we can get our title in up here, and then we could even bring in 2 smaller photos. Sometimes we have those. If not, you just want to play with your photos and make the page work for the photos that you have. Because what I would do if I had more photos is maybe even bring in another photo, a vertical one, and we can tuck it right underneath the mat like that, put our strip back in place, and it's just giving it a little playful feel by being tucked under, but you have room here to even do a vertical photo there as well. And then bring my embellishment clusters back in, so I would tuck it like this, put that big flower right there, tuck the green going this direction, would even maybe bring in another flower like that just to give something else up there underneath our title. So you see how you can just use the same elements and make another page. So one page you can have the 4-inch strip, the other page you can have a 6-inch strip. Okay, or I have one more variation to the strip on top of the block. So let me remove this now. This time what I did is I brought in a strip where I've already pre-cut out some circles using my custom cutting system, and I would place it right down here. This is about a 3-inch circle on a 3.5-inch strip. I used the large template with the blue blade on the inside. I think this one would make a great double page to one that we already did. You can bring photos in here. So I'm sorry, this one was actually the large template with the red blade, and then here I came back in on the photo. That's where the photo would be cut out, and that's the green blade. So I have a little bit of the brown showing through right there. And you can fill all 3 of these with photos, or you can just fill 2 of them and leave an open spot. I'm going to just put 2 more photos here and put an open spot here for some embellishing. And then let's take this one and we'll move it right over here. We have lots of room to do that. I'll grab one more. There we go. I'll put it right here. I still have this area here that I can embellish and this area right here that I can embellish. I think the first thing I would do is probably, I have these leftover circles from here. I want to bring in the same color. I would probably tuck it right under here just for something different. And probably on the second page, I would make sure to use one of those circle elements as well, just so the circles carry through to the whole 2-page layout. And then maybe cut another circle with some of the white lined paper. I like the smaller side, so I'm going to tuck that in right under here. Bring back in my embellishments just like I was doing. And then right here, I would definitely bring in some more florals. So I have another one of these. I'll use that one. I'm going to grab this one right here, bring it down over like that, and bring in some leaves. Tuck it under. This one's getting confusing because we think that's our second page, but I would bring in some little words of some kind. This one just says enjoy the journey, and I would probably put it just like that in the center. So it's a very appealing, eye-catching layout doing it this way. And our second page, we could either use just the block by itself or another combination of our strips. In fact, we forgot. Let's bring these back in. Those little tiny 1/4-inch pieces really help to elevate the page. I hope that you enjoyed all these different variations of how we can take our go-to design of the block and elevate it up to be what we would call a more intermediate level scrapbooking page. I think that we conquered it. Not hard steps to follow. Check for your layers, your mats, and use your tools. Now, I didn't use many tools on this. I used my custom cutting system and a tag, but I made sure to look somehow how I could use tools on my layout. Oh yeah, and my Deckel Blade. So I guess I got 3 tools on there. So thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna be back soon with the next one, which will probably be the half and half. I don't know when. I'm gonna have to work it in between some other projects, so please stay tuned and I'll be back shortly. Okay, take care everybody. Bye-bye.